Hey everyone, this is Julia Barbara, host of the Julia and Gino Podcast. I'm with the co-founder of Jake and Gino, my husband and co-host Gino Barbaro.
Julia Barbaro,
Hey.
how are we doing today?
Great.
You ready to let her rip?
I am.
Today, we want to welcome Brad Chandler, Chief Transformation Officer of the Brad Chandler Coaching, to the show. In 2022, he partnered with the investor who brought his neighbor's house to start Express Homebuyers. Fast forward 20 years, and that company has bought and sold 4,000 homes across the U.S. I should have said in 2002 he partnered. 20 years later, that success continued, combined with a major life transformation, has allowed Brad to focus on transforming millions of lives, guiding them toward growth and abundance through his program. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brad Chandler.
Oh, thank you for having me. My goal is to transform millions of lives. I haven't done millions yet.
That was really, I'm going to be honest with you. We had gotten on before and you said, let it go anywhere it goes. And that's part of the show. I made a couple of boo-boos, but that's okay. And that's what I think. We're going to talk about self-love on the show, something that a lot of men probably are uncomfortable talking about. Am I right, Julia?
I would agree with that.
What I want all the listeners to do right now is go to bradchandler.com/quiz. And I challenge you to take the quiz on self-love. And Brad, share your story with the listeners as you got out in business, crushing it with homes and all, but it didn't seem like that was fulfilling to you.
No, it wasn't. I thought I had everything together until I went through this, I guess it was meant to happen, right? My son had some anxiety issues and I was talking with a performance coach and she said, you have a tick, you blink profusely when you talk about your childhood. You may have some childhood issues that are causing your son's anxiety. Do you want to come work with myself and my husband at the time? And I did. And in 3 hours, I'm a guy that was in therapy on and off for like 30 years and went to 50 different marriage counseling sessions. But that 3 hours completely changed my life. And I got back home from that weekend and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I figured out the key to happiness in life. And I looked around at all the people who didn't have that and were struggling. I'm like, I think I can help these people. So here we are, 2.5 years later, and I've helped nearly 100 people and just radically transformed their lives. And I live my purpose every day. It's amazing.
So self-love, let's start with that. When did you realize that Brad didn't love himself and that was really detriment to himself and trying to show love for others? It's really hard to show love for others if you have lack of love for yourself.
It sure is, because if I asked you to give me 12 oranges and you didn't have them, how would you give them to me? So it was through that process. It was that 3 hours where I laid on a bed in an Airbnb bed in Park City, Utah, and we went back to my childhood. And what happens with all of us, I've yet to meet someone that doesn't go through some stress as a child. And what we do, our brains, to get us through that stress, make up a story. I'm 6 years old. I'm getting hit with a belt by my dad. Why is this happening? I must be bad, right? So I internalized that for 47 years. And during that exercise in Park City, I realized that, wait, I wasn't bad. I wasn't not enough. It was my father and how he felt about himself. And at that point in time, I just released it and I became free. And it was at that time that I began to love myself.
And Brad, when we had done a podcast with you, I'll never forget it. It was a couple months ago. We get on the show and we're talking about self-love, and I had quoted the Bible to you. How does the Bible quote go? I always mess it up, the Bible quote, every single time.
Remind me.
Love thyself as thy neighbor. Right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. Like I'm saying, it's like I have that mental block.
I wasn't sure which Bible verse you were talking about.
Love thy neighbor as thyself. It's in Romans, and every time I try to say it, but the gist of that love thyself, love thy neighbor as thyself. I can't. It's really presupposing that you have love for yourself. If you don't have love for yourself, and I'm sitting there the next morning, I'm whip out Romans 8. It's right there. Out of how many thousands of pages of the Bible I have that quote, and I had just spoken to you the day before about it. And fortunately for me, Brad, I went on a trip in May, a couples retreat. We had never really done anything like this with my wife, and we dove into our childhood. So how important is it to dive into your childhood? I had seen so many little things. And when we talk about traumas, you might experience these significant, large traumas in your life, but I didn't have those significant large ones. I still had smaller ones, but I still internalized them that way. How important was it for you to go back into your childhood and look and see what was going on?
Gino, guys, it is and Julia, it's a reason for everything. This lack of self-love is the reason for the war in Ukraine. It's a reason for our hospitals and prisons being full. It's a reason for child sex trafficking, the divorce rates, the obesity rates, the rate of anxiety and depression, everything comes back to an individual's lack of self-love. Even business mistakes. I made 5 business mistakes that cost me $9 million, all because of my lack of self-love. So how important is it? It's life-changing. It is like the only everything you were not born with lack of self-love. So something happened in your childhood that, again, it wasn't your fault. Your brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. It gave you hope for a better tomorrow. Because listen, my dad's hitting me, right? I'm saying I'm bad, but my brain is saying all I have to do is be good, and then this hitting will stop and maybe he'll start loving me. So I say I'm bad. So at 47 years old, when you are buying a 40-foot boat, trying to get to the Bahamas because your subconscious brain is saying you're not worthy, you got to go prove yourself, it doesn't suit you well. It works great when you're a 6-year-old trying to get through trauma. So to answer your question, it's everything. If you have a shitty relationship with your wife or your husband, or you're obese, or you have anxiety, don't despite what the doctors tell you, it's not something wrong with your brain, or that you're lazy and you just don't exercise or eat right. It is all stuff that's locked up from your childhood, that's buried in your subconscious mind.
Yeah. The weight thing is interesting because I did take some coaching programs on losing weight, and the whole key, and this is what my big takeaway was, a lot of us want to lose weight and then we'll like ourselves. We're going to love our bodies when we lose weight, when we get muscular, when this all happens, and we either don't get there because we truly don't. I think we're almost afraid to get there because when we get there, what happens? What if I don't love myself then? But we truly, it's so hard for us, just like what you're saying. And I think it's important to truly love yourself and know you're worth it, and also lose weight. Say, I love myself, but now I'm also going to lose weight. And I think to separate that is important.
There's something called ACE. It represents the adverse childhood experiences. And it's an enormous study that was undertaken by Kaiser. And how did this study all start? It started with a weight loss doctor in California that had these women in this weight loss program, and half of the women were dropping out despite getting great results. So he went and he brought them back and he surveyed them all. And he goes, "Why are you dropping out?" "Because if I lose weight, my attacker might come back." So most of these women were sexually molested as children. They put on weight to protect themselves. So when I talk about, when you lose weight, someone will come to me and say, "Hey, I lost a bunch of weight." The first thing I say is congratulations. And I really mean it. Great job, because it's hard to lose weight. The second more important thing I say is, did you figure out why you put it on in the first place? Because if you didn't, it is always going to come back. And I have people in my life that I've seen this their whole life. They go down and then they turn around, they go right back up. And it's not their fault. It's their brain saying, we've got to survive. We got to protect you. And to survive, we've got to put that weight back on.
Was it a lot of work, Brad, to go back into your childhood and dive into it? I mean, I know it's more work not doing the work, but for you, was it a lot of work to get in there and to really come out and say, "Hey, it wasn't my fault," or just to do that work?
It was 3 hours. It was a really interesting 3 hours. There was some pain involved in it. Just to look back and see that little boy didn't get what he wanted. But no, I mean, in general, now I do it in a 2-hour hypnosis session where, yeah, you come out of that and you're just like, wow, I can't believe I lived this way for so long.
Share a couple stories. Do you have any stories of any clients that you have that really had some rough childhoods and they're struggling and they're either doing drugs or drinking or partying or overworking? Because this touches every single person. You can overwork, you can overeat, you can have narcotics.
Well, even the perfectionism. I mean, that in itself,
Yes.
I think is a separate.
Yes.
Perfectionism is a child's way of trying to make him or herself perfect because their imperfect self wasn't good enough. And you can't ever be perfect. So it's just going to eat you up. I mean, we could spend the next 3 hours talking about clients. I'll highlight a couple that come to mind. One is a 56-year-old gentleman who after 5 weeks, or actually after 3 weeks, because the hypnosis is in the third session. 8 days later, I talked to him. He says, "Brad, I've just had the 8 best days of my life." For 56 years, and he's got a testimonial on my website. He's like, "I was an angry man. I hit my child. I was always angry." He goes, I go to the gym. People come talk to me. I reach out. I talk to them. All because you talk about like trauma. I think a lot of people would have looked at his life and been like, that wasn't trauma. But in hypnosis, we brought up some things where he just didn't feel loved. And so he internalized that and said, they don't love me because something's wrong with me. And now he's just a completely different human being 5 weeks later.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I'm curious how, because I want to talk about your personal relationships in your life before this. You've been married a few times, and how has that affected your relationships?
The lack of self-love. Oh my gosh. When you have lack of self-love, the quiz, by the way, you're going to get a result: lack of self-love, mild self-love, or extreme self-love. If you have mild self-love or you have lack of self-love, there is no chance you're going to ever go partner with someone and marry someone with extreme self-love, because they couldn't be with you. They would see your insecurities and they're like, I can't do this. So what do? Our unwhole selves always partner with other unwhole selves. And then you've got two people fighting for their wholeness. So it usually works out in one of two ways. One, it becomes a codependent relationship where there's not a whole lot of fighting, or there is, but each person's thinking subconsciously, not waking up saying this, but thinking, I can't live without this other person, so I'm going to stay in this miserable relationship forever. The other is, it's just a lot of fighting and arguing because you're constantly trying to prove your worth. The problem in relationships is never the actual relationship. It's always the relationship that each individual has with themselves. So another client success story, this person came to me a year ago. His marriage was on the brink of divorce. A year later, he's like, my marriage is completely different. Did I ever have a marriage counseling session or sit down with them? No, I just got him to reconnect with himself and love himself, and now everything has changed. So it cost me 2 failed marriages. It cost me it's really hard. It's near impossible to have a deeply connected relationship when you have two people that lack self-love.
But so, Brad, let me ask you this question. Let's say, we're in this relationship, me and my wife, and all of a sudden I become awesome. I find my self-love. How do we continue that relationship? Do I say to her, hey, Jewel, I've had this revelation. I really learned to love myself, and you've got to do it? Or how do you do that with one spouse really wants the growth and the other one thinks that I'm crazy about it? I've never heard hypnosis. What's that quackery? What's going on with that?
This happens. This happens. It doesn't happen, probably 20, 30% of the time it happens where someone accelerates and the other person gets stuck. And in the example I just gave you, this came up on our weekly mastermind call. One gentleman said he'd been with someone for 7 years. He was thinking about getting married, but now he's a little bit skittish because she lacks self-love, right? And then another person said the same thing. And then someone else came from the completely different perspective, which is this gentleman, and said, listen, I've learned to love and be in this loving relationship without needing my spouse to change. So there's no right answer in this. Your marriage can get better without him changing, or you can decide, you know what, this was a trauma bond from day one, and I think there's someone else better, or not think there's someone else better. I can be happier, or I can be more fulfilled with someone who wants to help me grow, because intimate relationships are where childhood trauma most rears its ugly head. But on the flip side, it's the greatest place in the world to heal, better than me, better than any therapist you'll ever go to, if you've got two people that are willing to provide a safe place to grow together.
Well, I think too, so we've been married 25 years. And when I look back at our, how we were when we first got married, holy smokes, were we different? We've grown so much, but not together. I'm just going to be honest. And I think when we talk about marriage,
what do you mean by that?
Meaning sometimes like you did coaching for a little while, you learned a lot of all like listening and all that stuff. And maybe I was either ahead or behind. And then I did it. And then now I'm a little bit ahead, even spiritually, religious wise. There were times where I was so close. I felt so close and, connected to God and close. And maybe you weren't. And so my point is, even in a marriage, we're not on the same page sometimes. We're not there. And, for me, self-love was not something. When I actually took your quiz, and I laughed during it because I'm like, man, if I took this like 5 years ago, I would have been completely different. But I didn't use hypnosis or anything like that. It was more prayer and all that. But it was interesting to see how our marriage is different, because usually you're waiting for your husband to say, love me, am I good enough? And you're asking, but now it's like, I know I'm good enough, but here I am. And so now our relationship has, exploded in the past 5 years or so because of that. And I think that's important to know, is wherever you are in life, your husband might not be in the same exact chapter than you, on the same page, whatever. But that's the beauty of the marriage that I witnessed with my husband, is that we watched each other grow separately, and we're kind of there together now.
Yeah, there's a phenomenal book that I send to all my clients. It's called The Way to Love by Anthony DeMello. And in one of the chapters, there are these little 4 or 5 page chapters, but they're profound as can be. It's like when you give up attachment, you get closer. So I said a couple of minutes ago about this codependent relationship. When you don't depend on Gino to tell you you're great and you're loving, then you can get closer. And people are like, it's a weird concept to think, but when you detach from your spouse and you don't rely on them for your love, that's when you can actually get closer.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
There's a lot of things that people say they need to be careful of. My better half is really happy wife, happy life. These are things that are just thrown around casually, and they're really detrimental and they're really hurtful. Brad, take me down the journey of when you started realizing all this, and your friends in your circle, are they like, Brad, are you nuts? What are you talking about? How was that? Because I mean, it's the same thing with me. I was a pizza guy, and all of a sudden I'm this multifamily person.
I fell in love with the pizza guy.
Yeah,
don't ever forget that.
I'm just saying, I transformed. I changed into this entrepreneur. I mean, walk us down that. I mean, as far as people saying that, Brad, really, guys, self-love. I mean, how is that? That must have been challenging and difficult for you.
There were, I mean, I had a friend reach out to me and say, was there something bad going on in my life? And I was like, no, just the opposite. And we got on the phone call and he was like, you seem like you're narcissistic because you keep talking about self-love. And I'm like, no, if anything, it's just the opposite. It's not about me being better than someone. I've just learned to love myself. And then a week ago at a mastermind, at Family Mastermind, a close friend of mine told me, he goes, when I first started seeing your videos, he goes, I was really turned off. He was like, I was jealous in a way, but I was also like, this isn't the guy. Like, this is just another thing Brad's doing to make money. And he's like, now I see you. And I'm just like, I see you completely different. And I realized it was never about the money. You were really making this change. But I was like, well, thank you for sharing that with me.
Bro, I'm going to put this out for everybody. Brad can make money a lot easier doing a lot more things than doing this. I'm coaching students to buy real estate. I make a lot more money buying real estate than actually teaching people. What Brad is doing out there, he's creating impact. I think it's success versus significance. He's had success. He wants to create significance. He wants to create impact for others. I think that Brad's doing this as a monetization. There's part of that involved. You need to make money to pay the bills. But at the end of the day, it's really hard because you got a lot of people hating on you, especially the guy segment. Once again, I can absolutely see people just saying this is not for me. How do you learn to love yourself? Give me some ideas. Give me some tips about, and you made such a great point, Brad, about narcissist versus self-love. They're completely different. Self-absorbed, being selfish is different than having self-love.
There's a reason why 98% of diet and exercise programs fail. There's a reason that even though marriage counselors exist, we have a 50% first divorce rate and a 72% third divorce rate. There's a reason for that. People lack self-love. How do you love yourself? There's 3 critical components, and I call them the 3 R's, that are needed to permanently change any mental state. And these 3 R's are missing from, I think, 95% of psychiatry, therapy work, life coaching. The first is recognition. You've got to be aware of what is driving the behavior that you want to change. I can't tell you how many clients I've had that when we go into hypnosis, they come up with scenes that they didn't even remember. So number one, how can you change without having an awareness? You can't. So you have to have awareness. That's number one. Number two, second R is rewire. Now that we know the story you told yourself, let's tell yourself a new story using neuroplasticity, which is just your brain's natural ability to regrow new neural pathways so that you can start thinking different and thus acting radically different. The third R is the reinforce. It's the conditioning of the brain. Now that we know what happened, the story, and now that you're rewiring it, every time that you have a negative emotion, you've got to remember you're in fight or flight. And I give you a tool called the Joy Regenerator tool that will change your life forever if you use that tool. And by the way, that's another free giveaway, bradchandler.com/joy. You can go there and download the tool. It will change your relationships, both in business and personal, and with your spouse, because we teach you every argument that you have is not about the actual situation. It's about you going back to that past and bringing something in.
Well, let me ask you before Julia jumps in another question. Why do you think most of these different factions you've talked about, psychiatry, life coaching, why don't they have the recognition? Why doesn't it go there? Because for me, going to couples coaching, Phil McKernan in May, we went back to our childhood. We went back to the past and recognized what's going on. That awareness is huge. And then obviously you go to the present of what's going on, and then you want to see your future self. What makes you believe that it's not there? Because it's such a huge component. I agree with you 100%.
This is gonna sound negative, but in life and in the world, if you want to follow a problem, you follow the money. And why my 21-year-old son asked me this question the other day. He goes, "Dad, do you think that the US government knows what you're doing in terms of how you could help people?" And at first I said no. He goes, "Dad, you don't think the smartest people in the world know what you're doing?" And I'm like, "I guess you're right." He goes, "Do you think they're keeping this because of the bazillion dollars they make in drugs?" And I'm like, "Yes, depression, anxiety. Doctors want to tell you something's wrong with your serotonin levels. There's no test you can do for serotonin levels. If you've got depression and anxiety, there's nothing wrong with your brain. What's wrong is the story that you're telling yourself from some childhood experience." So it's money, and I think it's lack of awareness. Doctors, when's the last time you went to a doctor where they said, "Hey, tell me about your stress and what happened as a child"? But inflammation and your thought process, it involves like 60 to 70% of all illnesses, but they never discuss it. Why? They want to diagnose you, label you, and give you a drug, because guess what? They make money off those drugs.
If negativity is reality, then we just hit reality, because I agree with you 100%.
That was not negative. Yeah, that was 100%
that was
true,
actually real. And one thing you said about your children, if you're on this and you're listening to this and you have children and your children are stressed, chances are, as Dr. David Hanscom told us on our last podcast, you're probably stressed and you're probably causing the stress to your children. So just remember that it's all about you and doing the work for yourself, because if you show up as a better person, you're going to affect your spouse and you're going to affect your children and you're going to affect your family members. And hopefully they wake up and say, "Hey, why Gino's on a grump today? What's going on with Gino? He's been pretty good for the last couple of years. What's he drinking? What's he smoking?" True story.
Gino, that was if we can't drop our mics because they're attached, right? But I would have dropped the mic right there. Or you could have dropped the mic on what you just said. When this is what I've said in 100 podcasts, if your kids have behavioral problems, if they are acting out in school, if they're causing trouble, if they have depression or anxiety, and you want to know the cause of it, I say grab your spouse's hand, go to the bathroom, and look in the mirror. And that is not an indictment at all, like you're bad. It's just the opposite. You, just like I had no idea I was causing my kids anxiety, you don't know. It's not your fault. So people come to me and they're like, "Hey, can you help my child?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can help them." But as soon as I put them back in the environment that created, it's going to go back. So just like you said, if you want to fix your child, look to yourself, because kids only misbehave when they lack connection to a parent.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing for people to hear. I love having older children now. So our oldest is 24, and I love sitting there and be like, "How did I mess you up? Tell me all the stories behind it. I want to hear it. I want to talk about it. I want to know about it."
You messed her up.
And little by little, we talk about you behind your back when you're at work. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of fun. But it's interesting, and we openly talk about it now, which is really, really helpful. And I encourage everyone to do that. But I need another step. We've done that. How do I start healing that relationship? Because I hear things that, first of all, a lot of times weren't even true. It's just a story they told themselves. And I'm like, all right, well, actually, let me tell you the full story behind that. But their brain is still affected by certain things that they think is what happened when, even though I've corrected it. Give me some advice behind that on how to actually start healing families.
So I have to make this point that if 10 years ago, someone would have asked me that question, if my dad, when he was alive, would have said, how did I mess you up? I wouldn't have known what to say. Yes, you hit me with a belt, and yeah, you made fun of me, but I would have been like, "Oh, that probably made me stronger." So it's the awareness that anytime that you feel in a situation where you didn't get your needs met, you're going to likely develop a story. So specifically, your question is what? How do you heal, like your situation? Like, how could you heal this with your daughter?
Sure. Yeah.
Just by continuing to be the person that loves, just love yourself unconditionally. That's it. Don't let her see you get angry, because if you're angry, that means it's something internal. So if she does something that makes you mad, you need to stop and pause and say, "This has nothing to do with her. This is my old self. I'm not going to allow it to happen." The more that she can see that, and the more that you can respond to her in love rather than fear and ego, the closer that you guys will become.
Yeah,
it's very difficult, Brad, because as fathers, I have 6 children, and I've got a lot of pressures. I've got a lot of stuff going on.
I have 6 kids too.
Yeah, I know, but I'm. This is the Julia and Gino show. I've got like 30 seconds where I can share my little story here, baby.
I was just
25 years
point.
of this, Brad. I'm just taking it from a personal, from ourselves. It's sounds easy to say, hey, don't. How do you? As we get older, it's a lot easier. But when we have little kids and we have 3 kids in diapers and we've got to pay the bills and mom's got to cook and clean, how do you have that awareness? Is there anything that you do mentally to say, to prepare people? Like, it's hard. It's hard to sit down and listen to them all the time when you get.
Can I just add something to that? Because and I agree with it. Now, as our kids are older, it's easy to say, oh, this is what we should have done. But I was talking to a mom yesterday who has a little baby and a bunch of little kids. And I said, listen, I just want you to know that, yes, sleep deprivation is real. And all of that. I honestly didn't sleep for 18 years through the night. And when I started sleeping, yes, well, I gave that to you because you work so hard. After that, I started sleeping. My oldest daughter was like, why are you so calm? Why is mom so calm? Why does she have fun? Why does she laughing? What's happening to mom that she's okay now? And it's because I started sleeping. And I just have to put this out. I'm not using it as an excuse, but when all our children are younger, it's really, really, really challenging to live in the moment, to be aware of what's going on with all of the being up at night, nursing the kids. I mean, it was a lot. And I think back, and I don't know if I could have done a better job, if that makes sense.
Brad, can you respond? Because I'm going to respond back to her real quick.
Yeah. So there's a reason that women have higher depression, anxiety, heart disease, cancer. It's because of what you just said. The women, you typically bear the major responsibility for raising kids. That's it. And there's a bunch of other things. But women definitely have it worse than men. And everything I'm talking about, if you are sleep deprived and you eat like shit and you don't exercise and you drink, I can't help you much. Like now you might be eating like shit and not sleeping because of this. So by me helping you, it's going to help that. But if I get you, if I fix your mental part and you go back to the not sleeping, you're going to be a mess. So it's the mental health, it's the sleep, diet, and exercise that all are important. So you're right. You did the best you could.
And I think I just want to point that out. Any woman or man that's listening, your wife is going through, is that kind of go easy on them, because it's real. Like being up at night with a baby, and it's literally never ending. And I just have to put that out there. There's a time for it. And I'm at a time now that I could speak, and I wouldn't have changed anything. And I'm thankful that I stayed home. I'm thankful that I did everything I did. And there's a season for it. Do the best where you are in life. If you have a little baby, sleep as much as you can, 100%.
There's one other caveat.
Yeah.
What we're talking about on the show, have some self-love.
Yeah.
And know that you're doing the best that you can. And then if you did love yourself a little bit more back then, maybe it would have been like, okay, I don't have enough sleep, but I don't have to go crazy. And if you love yourself, you can show that love to others. If you lack that, on top of all the other stuff, it's going to be a real big problem.
Yeah.
So Ram Dass, a famous philosopher, said, a spiritual leader, said that if you think you're enlightened, go home for vacation. So it's oftentimes the people closest to us. And I have a theory, I don't know if it's right or not, but I have a theory that with my 16-year-old daughter, who triggers me more than anyone in my life right now, despite all the work that I've done, why is that? It's because I'm safe with her and I know she's not going anywhere. So it's almost like it's easier to revert back to my childlike state. So here's a thought. You ask your child to unload the dishwasher. They don't do it. Here's my old self. I get mad. I yell. My feeling is I'm really mad, but madness and anger is always underlying sadness or unresolved hurt. Why do I feel this way? Because when I was a child, my dad made me feel not enough. So all I'm doing is bringing that in. So I ask myself, okay, does she not love me because she's not doing the dishes? No. The thought that started all this is she doesn't love me and I'm not enough. Now I think, okay, she's just a 16-year-old. She wants to be on her phone. So I short circuit. So rather than yell at her and then have it be this vicious cycle where she yells back and then it's like, oh, she really doesn't love me, I just short circuit it. And I'm like, okay, so I'm triggered for like 20 seconds instead of 2 hours or 3 days.
I like that a lot, what you just said. That actually resonates a lot with me because we are very guilty of that. And we always think it's something else, but it's not. Sometimes they're just a 16-year-old that does not want to do it. And let's be realistic.
We're taught, though, that you have to be hardgoing. You have to pay them for their chores. And if they're not doing that, they need the discipline. But when it comes down to it, if they love you and they know that they feel safe and secure in that environment, that's just a chore. They'll learn that throughout their lives, and they'll see you as the person that's doing that. That has that.
And it goes to perfectionism too, because a lot of times, I mean, I could just be honest. I've talked about myself, and I know this is my husband. We do expect a lot from our kids, and we're home together all the time.
We do.
And sometimes I'm like, all right, next thing. And the kids are like, really, Mom? Another thing? So we do expect a lot from these young guys. So it is, I love that story. I'm going to think about that.
BradChandler.com/quiz. I mean, as you're listening to this, maybe open up another browser and start taking the quiz.
I did the quiz.
I didn't do it. I'm going to do it after the podcast because I just don't want to. I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. It's my perfectionism. If I fail the course, what do I do?
But just remember, whatever score, it's not a score. It's just it's exciting because now you could like love yourself more,
That's it. I tell people, if you score mild self-love or lack of self-love, don't say, woe is me. Say, oh my gosh, if whatever my life is like now, it can be 10 levels higher. Whatever my marriage is like, it can go higher. Whatever I'm as a business leader, if you lack self, you're going to be a better everything, better father, better leader, better friend.
Yeah.
Brad, this is the last question for me, and this may be a challenging one, but let's say you do that and you have family members that are just driving you nuts. They're the victim mentality and they don't resonate with you and you're having problems with them. How do you go to Thanksgiving dinner? Because like you said, triggering. You're really going to get triggered by talking about politics or religion. Really, you have different opinions.
Technically, we should be able to talk about that
anything
and be okay with it.
But anything, and you have this self-awareness. You have this understanding. We have a little bit more of an understanding as well. How do you have these conversations, or how do you have these relationships with family members, especially when you can't really have them?
So I'm in that situation, and I know what you're talking about. It's one of two choices. You either protect your energy and you don't show up. Just because they're family members doesn't make it right that they're going to pull you down and make you into a negative, like lower your energy. So you can either avoid it, or when you're around those people, you can have compassion for them instead of judging them, knowing that they're coming from a place. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their wounded, hurt self, thinking they're not enough, and they're just trying to. It's called a call for love. They're asking for love from you, and you get to respond as a human being in love or ego or fear.
Yeah, I like that answer because we can have, and that's helped me get over a lot of things dealing with other people, is to have compassion. It really sit at a table and have someone yell at you about anything that you disagree with.
Because you're going through your stuff.
I know, but it's amazing because it's like, wow, this person really is going through a lot.
We're at a Brendan Burchard event real quick, and it was a growth day, and something he said to me was truly enlightening. All of this hate on social media, it's cynicism. If you're not charging enough for your product or you're not making enough money, that's a block. That's on you. That's not on anybody else. Somebody lashing out and trolling you online, wherever you are, you can take it wherever you are. And it's hurtful sometimes because I may not be at total self-love, but from that person, why would somebody who doesn't know you at all put something negative or hate you online? It's more of a reflection of where they are and the cynicism that's going on right now. That's hard for people to understand that, but that's the reality of it.
Well, if you get super offended by someone saying that, all I do is every day I put out a message on love. I get people calling me racist. I get people calling me, you don't know what you're talking about. And every time I do have compassion and I say, hey, I'll pick up here's my cell phone number. Let's talk. I'm sorry that you're hurting so bad. Let's talk. So you were saying at dinner, at Thanksgiving dinner, it's really, really hard. It is. But Gino, the more work you do on yourself, the easier it becomes.
Exactly. It's a challenge.
Wow.
Yeah.
Brad, where can the listeners get a hold of you?
BradChandler.com/contact has every single social media platform. It's got my cell phone number. You can schedule a call with me. If I can be of any assistance in any way, I'm here to help. Like you said earlier, use the word impact. This is the first business I've ever started where I didn't have money in mind, because my other business was all about making money to change my state to feel worthy and happy. Now all I want to do is make an impact, and I'm doing that, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's a crazy thing as an entrepreneur. We always start these businesses to provide for our families, when the real change and the real impact is when you start a business to provide for your customers, your clients. It seems like a little tiny shift, but that shift makes all the difference in the world. Can I recap this, baby?
Please, yes.
You wait for me to recap.
I love your recaps.
Okay, baby. I'm not going to let you down this time. Adverse childhood experiences. For those of you that don't know what that means, you got to go visit Brad Chandler's website. I think it's a truly important thing to dive into childhood. You talk about how to learn to love yourselves, the 3 R's: recognition, rewiring, and reinforcing. And I'm not going to say the Bible quote again because I messed it up twice, so I'm going to leave it. And since I love myself, I'm not going to edit it out. I'm going to show you the weaknesses that I have, because there's no true perfection. I think perfection is living in the moment and understanding that was supposed to happen, and share that we all have these imperfections. And self-love, to me, now that I'm learning all this, is truly vital. There's no such thing as happy wife, happy life. You have to be the happy spouse so that happiness can emanate from yourself so you can share that with others. BradChandler.com/quiz Take it. Don't be like Gino. If you fail it, it's okay. It's just an awareness piece. Julia, what
There's
say
no
you?
failing. No failing. See what I have to
That's
deal
my
with?
imperfections. I got to crush it. We have to crush it, baby, right?
But you're crushing it by taking it. You get it? Yeah. See, I had to have you on the podcast for him to take this stupid quiz, okay?
Brad, any final words, my friend? Anything else?
No, look, everyone deserves, if you're struggling with self-love, go get a picture of your 6-year-old self. I stole this from Mark Mincola. He has a documentary and book called The Way of Miracles, and it's amazing. Get a picture of your 6-year-old self, and every time you look at it, have 2 thoughts in mind: innocence and deservedness. You don't have to suffer. No matter what you're going through, don't keep telling yourself that you have to suffer. You were put on this earth for a massive mission. You deserve to live a joyous life with deeply connected relationships. And I didn't think it was possible before in so many people, but I'm telling you, it is possible. So reach out, and if I can't help you, I'll put you in contact with someone who can.
Thanks, Brad. We appreciate it. Once again, bradchandler.com/quiz. Take care, my
Thanks,
friend.
Brad.